In the tapestry of life, where every thread holds a story, America in black and white emerges as a haven for the voices echoing through the heart of our communities. In this podcast, we wade through the rivers of our collective experiences, celebrating the vibrant hues of change brought forth by the whispers of hope and the roars of action. It's more than just a conversation. It's a journey into the heart of our society, illuminated by the light of those daring to dream and do. Join us, and let your voice be the melody that guides us toward a dawn where every color finds its place in the masterpiece of our shared destiny. Together, let's paint a future brimming with the positives that dwell in our minds and the actions that shape our world.
Good evening, family, and welcome to America in Black and White tonight. We continue our mission of truth telling, legacy building, and amplifying voices that inspire transformation. Our guest embodies resilience, leadership, and the power of vision from the Jamaican countryside to the British Army, from boardrooms in London to stages across the globe. Leroy Roberts has lived a life defined by courage, clarity, and compassion. He is a strategist, a speaker, and a thought leader who helps executives rebuild trust and engagement in their teams. His journey is not just about personal success, it's about creating opportunities for underserved communities and carrying forward the legacies of Marcus Garvey, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and Nelson Mandela. Tonight, we explore his story, his mission, and his vision for leadership that uplifts and transforms. Stay tuned. This is going to be a powerful show. Ladies and gentlemen, I will introduce you guys to Mr. Leroy Roberts. Hello, sir.
Hello, Charles. Great to see you. Great to be here with your amazing audience.
Hey, I appreciate you for being here. And is there anything you'd like to say to the audience before we jump into the show?
I what I want to say is I am really looking forward tonight to this wonderful experience, just to share my story and my journey, and hopefully, as I share that story, you can see your own story in that. And I think tonight is going to be a very great night, and just hang tight. You're going to enjoy this one.
Well, thank you so very kindly. And I would like to start, so people can get the feel and understanding of you, the person that you are. I'd like to start with your life story in early years. Take us back to your childhood in Jamaica. What was life like on the family farm?
No, no, thank you for that. And I'm really happy that I can invite you and your audience into my world. Uh, just think about this for a moment. The experience that I had growing up is not the typical experience you'd expect for most people my age. Of course, this is Jamaica, not too far from where you are there in the States and in the Central Caribbean. But the lived experience there is quite different. And even though it's a very small island, roughly 250 square mile, as you move from the central capital out to the countryside, you can see that contrast is almost like going back in time. And so growing up, it felt in some parts like probably life, I would say, it felt like the 50s, 1950s. Some part reflects the 1960s. And the lived experience for other people in major towns and city was quite different from mine. So it was hard work. Myself and my siblings and our parents growing up on the family farm. And that's what was expected because the people around you lived and operated that way. Now, when you grow up in a setting like this, it is quite fitting for you just to accept life as you see it in the people who have gone before you, i.e., the people who are around you. And what I was viewing and what I was witnessing at the time growing up, it just did not sit well with me. And I personally wanted more. I couldn't describe what more looked like, but of course, the thirst was there for more.
So, in just thinking about that and how things were where you guys did, you did all of your work and everything to build your farm. Can you tell us in those experiences, what was the one thing that triggered your experience that made you think and made you say, I need more or I'm going to do something different? What was that experience?
I was being offered a future that just did not sit well with me because the question lingering in the back of my mind was there has to be more than that. It can't just be that I'm going to be born in this small town and this small village, grow up here, never make it to high school, just work from the farm to the marketplace, and just accept that life, which was typical of most people around. And I wanted a bit more than that.
You said you recognized flaws in leadership at just 13. What sparked that awareness so young?
What I recognize quite early on in my journey and my experience is that in order for you to do something that has never been done before, it takes courage and it takes going against the prevailing narrative. And what I was faced with at that time was a decision. And it was a decision to pursue something that most people would consider rather simple. Because at this time, it was coming up to the moment where I would be sitting my high school exam. And no one in my family before me had ever gotten the opportunity to take that. And I was hell bent that I wanted that. And just by being persistent with that decision to follow through with it, that's when it dawned on me in that moment whilst I made that decision that what else that I've been told that's not possible, that might just be possible. And if I have that courage and that persistence to follow through with it, then I might be able to achieve that future that I have always dreamt about, but don't know fully exactly how I'm going to get there. And that's the realization, or you could say the epiphany that came about for me in that experience.
So, how did bluffing your way into higher education shape your resilience and determination?
What it did for me, it made me realize that what most people think is impossible is possible and that can be done. And that single act was, I think, the first domino that made everything else look different for me in my mind and my perspective. And I think from that point onwards, I became unstoppable because I had no evidence to show that if you remain firm and steadfast with any goal and dream that you have, you will figure out a way how to accomplish that. And I did just that. That one simple act made it very, very clear in my mind that I can achieve.
So in the process of doing that, was it like you was getting a feel and you was feeling your way until you can decide exactly how you was going to approach and elevate? Or was there like just a group or a slew of things that looked like they were attainable to you and you just wanted to just see what would work and then you would go with it?
Yeah. It's a mixture of all those elements because, of course, at that time, I wasn't as aware. And as a result, I was stumbling and fumbling my way through. And the more you do that, you learn from life experiences. And also, you come in contact with other people along the journey, whereby you could lean on their exposure, and that will help you to scale some of the hurdles a bit more cleaner than I did, initially starting out.
So what lessons from Jamaican countryside still guide your leadership today?
The core decision is you have to have a conviction. You have to believe in something, even when no one else around you believe in that. Because that experience about going into high school taught me one simple thing is that if you follow through with your decision, many of the people who doubted you will now become your supporters. But you will not get that support in the beginning. And after I followed through with that decision, many of the people who mocked and ridiculed, they became, let's just say, supportive more and more as I began to demonstrate that most of what they were being fed with as not possible is very, very much possible.
So, who were your earliest role models growing up?
Now, in the introduction, you cited one name there, Marcus Garvey. Is, of course, a national hero of ours in Jamaica. And you know that he was not only confined in Jamaica because he was well traveled. In fact, he was quite instrumental because when he traveled to the US, he had a massive movement there. And he did a great job to unite people of African descent around a common cause. And he gave them a belief in themselves that they were capable of far much more. And when I learn about him through music and song, and I would hear some of his quotes and teachings, that obviously sparked an interest. And there's one particular quote that resonates strongly, and it goes as follows: without confidence in self, you are twice defeated in the race of life, but with confidence, you have won even before you have started. And I think it took me a while to unravel that and to really get the deeper meaning behind that. But I think over time, in my own experience and journey, I've come to realize that that's very much true. Once you take that very first step and you overcome something that most people believe is not possible, that boosts your confidence. And also, as you progress ahead and you develop competence, that further reinforces that confidence. And then something magical happens. Once you become confident, then you naturally ooze confidence and you can affect the people around you in your environment. And that's a beautiful thing to see how you can inspire people to find faith and belief in themselves. But you have to bring a different energy to that environment and into that space.
So, can you tell us what was it about Marcus Garvey with you being a young man growing up and you see him? what was that one thing, or what was it about him that was so mesmerizing, that he became one of those people that you had to follow, and he left a good message for you?
When I got wind of and a great awareness of the challenges and the struggles which he had to deal with on a day-to-day basis, and what was the order of the day at that time, it was no easy decision for him to carve out the vision that he had and to share that with other people and to also get people to see that more is possible. And we were not, the people at the time never had to accept their lot, a life of perpetual servitude, a life of perpetual subjugation. And he pretty much demonstrated that. And we have the benefit now of hindsight to know that his vision and his dream could have been realized and could have been realized, and far much more people would have been able to see and experience the benefit of that. And that is clear from his track record and the work he has done. And his legacy still lives on. But sadly, when I look back, even in my very home country, the history and his teachings and his work and his achievement, that is not something that is heavily taught and celebrated. And I think far much more work can be done to spread the word about his life and legacy. And I think there is a trap that exists when it comes to great leaders like these who have made such enormous contribution. There is a tendency to reduce these leaders to a slogan. For example, I have a dream, which is one common one, by any means necessary. But there was far much more than those words, and those words were powerful, of course. But when you study the body of work and what was achieved within such a short space of time, most of the greater achievements are still unknown to most people, sadly so.
Um, how did your upbringing instill values of courage and clarity?
That became something that was weaved into life on a whole because I had only had two options. Is either I'm going to accept life as I know it, and I could see the people around me and the results that they would have in their later years. And it's not that we are bashing those work because we are grateful for those people who have gone before us. And of course, they never had some of the opportunities that we now have. But at the same time, the choice was, are you just going to fall in line and just do what everybody else around you have done? Or are you going to follow the dream that you have and to pursue that relentlessly, regardless of the fact that no one may believe in you now, regardless of the fact that there's not a crowd rallying around you and patting you on the back and say, go for it. And that was true of the leaders that we spoke about. When
Okay.
they started out initially, there were obvious challenges that they had and that they faced.
So, what was the turning point that made you realize leadership would be your life's work?
If you look at all developed countries that were doing really well, all developed societies that were at the forefront and was making the greater contribution to the world at that time, they were they all had one thing in common. They had good leadership. They had leaders who were not thinking about the here and now, but they were also thinking about the next generation. And the fact that that was the common theme through all nations that were doing really well at the time, it dawned on me that we have the capacity and we have the capability to do likewise. Because, as evidence in the leaders that name whom we have mentioned, these are people, of course, who have served us really well, and they would have gone on to do much greater things to advance society had they not been cut down whilst they were trying to bring that vision to light. And then I recognized that there's no other way. Everything good that we have seen in this world has been achieved through leadership. Somebody always had to step forward and emerge and to pursue that, to create that outcome that didn't exist at the time.
So, how did your family respond to your ambitions beyond the farm?
I honestly believe that they meant well, but there was also an element of fear that was involved. And understandably so, given that they would have grown up in different circumstances and with the limitations, there are many things that they didn't believe that was possible. And I think that fear unfortunately caused them to transfer those limitations. And as a result, that posed some challenge in the beginning. But I don't think it was a matter of them wanted to put those challenges and limitations there. But I don't think they were even aware that that's what they were doing by their actions at the time.
Now, do you think that in that process, and just thinking back, do you think that they were thinking more so of the family legacy, the legacy of the farm, but then also if you were going to venture out and branch out, you know, also the thinking of how would that be relatable, or how could they, like have that same relationship with you if you're actually gone so far? Do you think that that was probably part of the thought process?
It could be. I know when I started out initially, it was education. I knew I needed was to educate myself. No, that came with a huge financial burden. And I think just the thought of that alone was just difficult to handle. And they just reacted. But there might be some other elements as well of what you mentioned that could have been present. But all in all, it created a mix and a blend of push and pull factors, which didn't make things as smooth for me. And looking back now, I am happy for that because it allowed me to develop the muscles that I needed to move to the next level and to be able to be, I would say, equipped for the journey. And I can tell you, it has been quite a journey.
Well, I think a lot of times, especially when it's like, I'm going to use myself as an example. Um, when I decided I was going to branch out because I wanted to do what I wanted to do because I felt like I needed to have, broad visions and horizons of just looking at many other things other than what I was used to seeing. And when I think back to that with my situation, because I'm the oldest of three,
Mm.
and so what I was thinking and what it showed to me is that the concern was, in the back of their mind, like the last thing was, yeah, we want you to do that, but we ain't ready for you to do it yet. And so, and just thinking that, hey, I'm ready to go somewhere. I have never been there, but I'm ready to make these adjustments. They weren't ready to make the adjustments because the times were changing. But I see that with a lot of parents and their kids, especially when you got one that's saying, "Okay, it's time for me to go," and it's like, "Where you going?" And so it's I guess it's a double edged sword because some kids actually just cow down and say, "Okay, well, I'm not going to do this," you know, but others say, "I gotta go," and and it seems like you said, "Hey, I gotta go," and so
No,
you'll do it.
you're perfectly right, Charles, and I think you made a very great point there. And there's a well-known saying that people do not resist change; they resist being changed. And the fact that I was about to step out and step away from the natural order of things, it's going to force them now to react to that or to deal with that. And I don't think they knew how to deal with that. And it really created a disruption because my younger brother who followed me, he now had that clear example to say, hey, there is another way. And he even got off it much, much faster than I did. So
Mhm.
to underscore your point,
Yeah. So what challenges did you face as a young black man pursuing education and freedom?
there are many because resources were at a minimum, and that pretty much limited your options and your choices. And the good thing for me was as I started along that journey, because I had some wins in the past, I learned quite early on that I should not become too obsessed with how I'm going to do it. I just need to have a clear vision of what it is that I want to do. And providing, of course, that it is something that is worthy of pursuing, then the rest is history. And along the way, I was able, and this is beyond high school now, of course, doing multiple jobs and working and studying in the nights. And once I got to the tertiary level, I was able to benefit from a number of scholarships whilst working through study. So the way is always possible. I think most people they stop themselves in the track from pursuing whatever it is that they're going for because all they can see before them is an empty bank account. When
Mhm.
I started this thing, I never even had a bank account. So I never had that to look at. There was no balance to look at. So that's how it is. And the resources will always come once you have made that firm decision and you are willing to take action to make that a reality.
So, how did those challenges prepare you for the global stage?
One of the key takeaway was that there's going to be a lonely walk. There's going to be a part of the journey where I will have to walk it alone. I would have to get used to being alone and to endure challenges and situations that will not be pleasant, but I also learned that it will also be seasonal. And that's what most people need to get, is that whatever it is you're going through, it will not always be like that. And that's why you need that resilience to be able to push through. But in life, there is peaks and troughs. And there's a well-known saying that lessons are repeated until learned. So whilst you're going through those phases in your life, those difficult moments are to prepare you and to give you the skills needed so that when you get to the other side, or when you get into the new season or new chapter, you are able to remain grounded and to function well there. And if you didn't learn those lessons, you will have to repeat them.
Mm. So let's transition over to your military career and service. Tell us about your journey into the British Army and what motivated that decision.
Yes. So whilst I was doing my tertiary studies, I was at university. I was working while studying simultaneously, and I was in the loss loss protection and risk management space. So that naturally prepared me with an alternative uh, pathway. And that led to me going into law enforcement whilst I was still in Jamaica at the time. And once I got into that and I worked there for a few years, I then recognized that if I'm going to serve at the highest level here and make the greatest contribution, I needed was to invest more in myself and to equip myself further. And so, true to form and true to what I would have experienced before, I set off to apply for graduate studies here in London. Again, not knowing how I was going to be able to fund that. I knew that there were scholarship options available, and whilst that did not work out in my favor, I still went ahead, still applied, and made all the preparation, got accepted.
Oh, wow.
And when it got to that time where I needed to find the funds to do that, which of course it was an astronomical figure,
Mm. I can
that's when,
imagine.
yeah, we're talking about many millions, because I think by the time my undergraduate studies cost me a little over and this is just tuition and fees only. Tuition and fees only was over $1 million Jamaican dollars. And to pursue this graduate program, I was looking at, wow, I would say anywhere closer to about 4 or 5 million for just a year of studies. And that does not include room and all the other stuff to go along with that. So when I saw the opportunity that the British Army was recruiting from the Commonwealth, immediately I saw that opportunity and I just went straight for it.
So, now this is a two-part question. Had you ever had any military experience at all? And if not, what made you take this opportunity or take this chance?
The So no, I had no military experience,
Mhm.
but given the hostile environment which I operated in
Okay.
whilst in law enforcement in Jamaica, and not only that, but I had knowledge of the statistics. And at that time when I checked it, and this is a sad thing, the fatalities which were happening locally at the time, it was higher than what was happening in active theaters of war. So when I compare the data, I said, well, I'm already in a hostile environment. And it presents me, this option at least present me with an opportunity to get closer towards my goal. It wasn't an easy decision to make because I had to uproot myself, leaving everything I know behind, family, the life I would have created up to that point. And this was my very first time leaving the country. So it was a bold step.
Well, can you tell us this? What were some of the most defining moments of your military career?
Wow. No, the British Army is a unique place to work in. And because the tentacles of the British Empire went so far and wide, and they also actively recruit from the Commonwealth, it created a very diverse environment, which of course naturally had its advantages and disadvantages. So if you had a closed mind and you were not open to new ideas and working with people, then you would definitely struggle. Uh, Going through that experience, it has really took all that I would have experienced prior to a whole nother level. Because I was in a different situation. I just want you to picture this for a moment. You have leave everything that you know behind. You're in a totally new environment. You have to adapt to the new culture, the new ways of working, and then at the same time you are being prepared to make the ultimate sacrifice just the same. And there were other challenges that you face as well as an outsider and fitting in and just trying to perform your role at the highest standard and at the same time just to keep your sanity because you had to wear so many hats and to become so many things to function in that environment. If you're not careful, you can really lose yourself in those spaces.
You know, you said some things, while answering this question that actually caught my attention. And I want if you could tell us, like, what was the culture like for you? Were you culture shocked, and how did you adjust to that? And did culture even play a part in all of the adjustment that you had to
Of course, the culture there was the best way to describe it is this way. Let's just say the trailer was better than the movie.
make? That's interesting.
Yes. So it was sold really well, and you see that you are pumped, you're ready. This is what it's gonna be. But until when the rubber meets the road and you're in that situation, you realize that there is a clash of experience and conviction, and that naturally uh, creates dissonance. And you have to deal with that every day. You wonder now, how do I deal with this? But you don't really have the time and the space to sit down and to ponder and to go over it. You're in it already, and you just have to make it work. And that's where the innovation comes in, and that's where I had to draw heavily on not only the experience I would have had in the past, but the level of openness that I would have bring with me, because I said this many, many times. I did something that myself and many other people do it all the time, every day. But most people in comfortable countries and environment don't do that. They don't pick themselves up from their country, leave their family behind, leave everything that they know, go into another environment, to work into another system, to work with people you don't know, people who don't like you. Now, for you to be able to do that, you have an attitude, a winning attitude, I would say. You are willing to throw yourself into an unknown environment, and you are flexible enough and willing enough to learn, to adapt, and to grow, not knowing whether or not you will fail or succeed.
Mm.
So I had to take 10 steps before most of my counterparts that were native to this land take their very first step.
Right. How did serving in multiple nations shape your worldview?
So it's one of the best education I could have ever received. And it made me realize how important it is that we need to have intellectual curiosity, and we need to be open to other ways of thinking and ways of operating. Because when we stay in our little bubble, we can become blindsided to the very thing that we might need. And sometimes it's not necessarily new information, but it's just a new perspective. And sometimes that's what is needed to shift a conversation. And sometimes that's what it is really required to make a decision that can produce better outcomes for everyone involved. And sadly, there are many environments where they don't have that, because it's an environment where everybody around them think like them, they eat the same thing, they do everything pretty much in a similar way. And it's a form of cloning oneself. And I think that's not a very smart environment to be in.
Well, don't you think that that's a part of the structure that you learn from being a part of the military? Because I think that structure weighs on military personnel longer than one can believe. Because you find yourself in that structure that it becomes like a natural thing. And it's like to adjust back to the civilian life and culture outside of that, it's kind of like being lost. Did you experience that?
What you're describing now is a problem that many people are plagued by. I think one of the benefit I have is that I had the opportunity to have lived and worked and gained exposure prior to me going into the military. Many of the person whom I would have met along the journey who went straight into military service out of high school, they have no idea what the outside world is like. And I
Right.
think they tend to struggle a whole lot more. And it's not very difficult for you, whilst you're having conversation with someone, to tell whether or not they have a bit more exposure. It comes out quite easily in just how one thinks and approach situation, and you can pick that up. And I was able to pick that up quite easily as well.
So, what lessons in discipline and teamwork did you carry from the Army into civilian life?
I would say one of the best example, and there are many to draw from, is that when there is a mission to accomplish, regardless of the differences you have with the person beside you or behind you, you have to set that aside to accomplish the goal because there is so much at risk, and you have to put aside your petty differences, and that's key. And I think you will need that type of attitude to succeed in any aspect or area of your life because you'll never be able to have true success as an individual. You will need people along the way, along that journey. And it's important to know that, to learn that, and to recognize that, and to be open and willing to accept advice, accept support, because you will need it. And those lessons were hammered into us very, very early. And it is great to walk away with that.
I want to do a word association game. I'm going to say a word, and I want you to tell me the first thing that comes to your mind. And I want you to remember the words as I ask you the words, because it's going to be very important to tell me how they are so important. First word, Jamaica.
Mm.
First word to come to your mind.
Home, home,
Team,
collaboration,
work,
purpose,
people,
the greatest gift,
family,
duty,
mother,
love, and life,
military,
discipline,
culture,
environment.
life,
I didn't get that last one.
life,
Light,
life,
life.
Life, life.
I would liken that to, I would say, education,
Final word is adjust.
intelligence.
Okay. Of those 10 words, which word is the most important to you and why?
I would say duty. And the reason for that, it's the one word that encapsulate and capture all the ideals, responsibilities in one unique label. Because I have a duty in this life. I have a duty towards my mother. I have a duty in work, relationships, society. And that duty, in order for that to be achieved, I will need to exercise many of the attributes which I mentioned, such as discipline, and others. So that one word, I think, best encapsulate everything.
Okay, so like is it pick what it has to be one of those 10 words that I mentioned to you. Duty wasn't one of those, but it seems like you were actually relating all those back to life.
Mhm.
So is it life the most important word there in that group to you?
I thought duty was one of them. Well, seeing that you said that's not the case, then I would use the word work. And when I use the word work here, I am not referring to one's profession. I'm talking about your life's work, which
Mhm,
again ties in perfectly with duty.
mhm. Okay. So can you tell us, how did your military service prepare you for leadership and consulting?
Good. So during my time in the military, it was a mixed environment, and that is the case with almost everywhere. You see the good, the bad, and the ugly,
Mhm.
and you can learn lessons from all three. But one of the things that I was able to spot, and this is not only the military, but I also spot this elsewhere, is that I was always puzzled by the fact that there were many people who had great contribution to make, smart people, committed people who were willing to sacrifice their all. But the environment within which they operate did not lend itself for those individuals to express and to develop their full potential.
Mhm.
And as a result of that, it pained me very deeply to see so many potential that was just left untapped. And I experienced that myself along that journey.
Mhm.
And it was that experience more than anything else that developed within me the desire to correct that. Thankfully for me, there were good examples where I saw leaders who were committed that that would not happen under their watch. But there are also those who created that toxic environment, and they benefited from that in the short term, but truthfully in the long term no one benefited. And that's what really prepared me to step into the world of work that I'm in now. And that is why I now dub myself as the culture reset guy, because when the culture is right, most of the other challenges that were there, they could have easily be appropriately handled, because you will not be treating symptoms, you would be dealing with the root cause.
So, what was the hardest challenge you faced as a soldier?
I think the most difficult, and as for that question, I would have had time now to think this through long and hard. The most difficult challenge I personally would have faced, and I would say both personal and vicarious, because you learn also from other people who were there before you and also your peers, is to be in an environment where you are not allowed to become your best, to be in an environment where your growth is contained. Nothing is worse than that, because I don't think no one should determine how far someone else can go and how best you can be. I think no one else should have that right to determine someone else's future and how far they can go. And sadly, there have been experiences like that in the toxic element, where I've seen so many potential shut down. I've seen so many people, prevented from really contributing in ways that they could and make a great difference. So that I would say is the most painful part that I've seen. And that happened in an environment where there was a failure of leadership.
So, what are some words of wisdom and encouragement you can give to your fellow countrymen that are coming to serve in the British Army? What are some things that you like for them to not only understand but be ready and able to adjust to, that they're going to need to know?
Before you come, just ensure that you have a clear goal, and you should never allow that goal to be robbed from you, because whether or not you have a full career or a short one, the truth of the matter is there will come a time when you will have to put the uniform down and you will have to become a civilian again. And if you don't have a major vision, a larger vision for what you want that life to be, you will be given one. And that's the worst mistake you can make, because if you allow someone else to create your future for you, you're going to end up with something that you will not enjoy.
Wow, that's really powerful and that's really deep, because I think sometimes, especially when you're young, I don't think like a lot of times your mind is not really like just open to really putting a lot of things there and situationalizing things. And it's like sometimes when you're young, you just run on in there and you just go to do something and you don't really think about the purpose, the goal, the intentions, or things of that nature. So that was really powerful. And I think that's a good message that, especially for your young countrymen, that they should really adhere to, because the military is totally, totally different than civilian life. And that structure is one that once you get into that environment, you've got to make some real serious adjustments. uh, so, so when we just talking about that, and we talked about culture and so forth, tell us, how did you navigate those cultural differences while serving abroad?
Now, the good thing is, and again, I think this is where the British military is rather unique, is because they recruit from a diverse pool of people. There is no country that we have been in that we never had somebody who a part of our team who was not from that country. And in most cases, wherever we, we operated, in many instances, these were former British colonies or protectorates. So these are not alien places. So there is a working knowledge of how things operate. And so that cultural understanding is key, because without that, you won't be able to operate successfully in those environments. And so cultural intelligence was a very, very important thing. And the diversity amongst our teams naturally made it easier for us to operate in those spaces. And of course, we would have lived, like I said, beside different people from different countries. And it was really an amazing experience.
So, what role did mentorship play in your military journey?
Now, mentorship was key. When I started out initially, I never had a mentor. So I was pretty much going through it by myself. And of course, I made some mistakes as a result, and I got some things wrong. But then I recognized quite early on that I needed was to learn from somebody else. And whenever you are fortunate enough to find yourself in an environment where you have people who are willing to avail themselves, then I think you should definitely take advantage of that. I had the opportunity to come to know people along the journey, people who started out much, much earlier before me. And once I get an idea to assess who these people were, then once I recognize that where they were and where I wanted was to be was in alignment, then I made the very best choice from the very tiny selection that existed at the time. And that's key because most people get this wrong. Mentorship is totally different from having a coach. When
Mhm.
you're choosing a mentor, you see qualities and you see results in that person that you'd like to attain. And you're seeking those individuals out because they are 10 step ahead of you and they can help you to get there. So in choosing mentor, please choose carefully. That's key.
How did your military career influence your sense of responsibility to community?
The military is all about service, and it is service beyond self. And that wasn't something new for me because prior to the military, I served in the police service, police force.
Mhm.
And so I was already coming in with that sense of service and duty to country. And so it was a natural, a hand in glove relationship. And that helped me to recognize, and it lined up naturally anyway with my own personal values long before I came into this country. Because you can't be safe, your family cannot be safe if the community that you live in is not safe. And therefore, it behooves us then that we should all have community interests. Because by making our communities safer, we are naturally guaranteed our own safety and security.
Let's transition over to your work as an entrepreneur and your community impact. Um, what inspired you to become an entrepreneur after military service?
Good. So the entrepreneurial pathway for me only made sense because I would have had the opportunity to see other entrepreneurs, see the great work that they were doing, and also the contribution they are making. And I think sometimes entrepreneurs are not given the credit that they deserve. And it's very hard work because being an entrepreneur, it requires conviction, it requires courage, it requires hard work. And you need that resilience and mental toughness because most entrepreneurs have had many failures before they have any success. And so these are people who have been through a lot and they're oftentimes coveted for their achievements, but most people don't know the journey and the experience that they have been through. So when I recognized the challenge or the challenges I saw and how there was no adequate solution to that, and I'm now referring to the toxic culture piece, I began to think about that more and more. And the more I thought about it, is the more I realized that in order for me to adequately address this issue and to provide a solution to this issue, I will not be able to do it as an employee. Because as an employee, you are limited in terms of what you can do because you are employed in the context of someone else's environment, and you have to ensure that you are fulfilling what it is that they employ you to do.
So, how do you define entrepreneurship beyond profit?
Entrepreneurship beyond profit is when you arrive at a place where it's not just income, but it's also impact. And you can balance that out and achieve both outcomes. And just like how I would have explained to you before now, the importance of having community interests. As a person who is an entrepreneur, you want to ensure that in fact, business is all about providing solutions to problems. And in providing solution to problems and serving people with products and services, naturally, you should want to treat your customers fairly. And you should want to move your customers from a place of being customers to being clients, by you can be a trusted advisor to them. And once that relationship is developed to that level, you want to ensure that you guarantee good outcomes for the people that you do business with, your stakeholders. It's that type of relationship. And that means you will have to do business ethically. You will not want to operate in an environment where you just want to extract all you can, and yet still you leave the community within which you operate in a state of ruin. You should leave it better than how you found it.
Yes. Tell us about the opportunities you've created for underserved communities.
Yes. So being true to form yet again, service is in my DNA. It has always been that way from my time growing up in the Caribbean and also here in the UK. And as I became more aware as to the challenges that the communities within which I live faced and the wider region, it was quite shocking for me when I recognized the fifth, sixth wealthiest country in the world had 4.5 million children living in poverty. I couldn't stomach that. It was quite tough. And if those children are struggling like that and are living in that state of poverty, then naturally the parents of those children are struggling also. And it became increasingly apparent when you look at the massive divide between those who are well off and those who are not so well off. And a lot of these people who are struggling is not because they're lazy, it's not because they don't want to work. That might be true for some, but not all. We're talking about people who are educated, who are doing well. But society is changing so fast. And most of the things that, and by things here I'm referring to the skills and qualification that one had in the past, which could have guaranteed them a decent job with decent income, those are no longer possible. And not only that, but there are other things that get in the way. It can be an illness or an injury that can destroy an entire family and put them in a very horrible state. And people like those need some assistance. There needs to be some safety net for those members of society. And when I assessed that on a wider scale and I realized that there were so many people in this country who were shut out of the financial system, they were not even able to have a bank account. That's what led me to get involved in the cooperative movement and the credit union space. And credit unions for in the States, your audience might be, no, not might, will be more aware because the credit union is a massive institution in the States. But here in the UK, it's very, very small, comparatively speaking. And so I work closely with the credit union here to help out when it comes to the economic development side, to serve those members of society that are shut out of the financial system, those people who are not able to get a bank account or products and financial products and services from the main street banks. We provide opportunities for them. And it has been a great work, and it has been amazing to be a part of the movement and providing solutions in the forms available.
So, as you're doing that, can you tell us what are the barriers do marginalized communities face in accessing leadership opportunities?
So the challenges are real, and we should not argue around it. And this is not trauma dumping, but from my own experience and the experience of many others before us, most people, if they're honest, they will tell you that the narrative which sums this up best is still true. You have to work twice as hard to get half as far, and you have to be twice as good to get half as much. There is no meritocracy. Well, at least I haven't seen it. And already there is, by virtue of the fact that you are a minority, the odds are against you. And there's no need to pretend or to argue around that. The only solution around that is not to accept that space that have been carved out for you, which you are expected to accept, but it is to become so good that you can't be ignored. And one of the things that I enjoy doing is I love a challenge. And if you tell me I can't do something, well, I'm going to prove you wrong. And people like that looks like me, we are not expected to become captains of industries and to lead.
Mm.
They expect us to stay in the entertainment space. They expect us to be in sports. That's what they expect. And so when you are stepping into other areas, you will get that look because you're entering rooms and spaces where you're a foreign face. And I don't think the environment lend itself naturally to have better representation in these spaces, which are normally, let's just say, not very populated with minorities. But that has to change. And the only people who can change that is us. And I think the work that I'm doing now, hopefully, that will add to that, to know that everything is possible. And if the doors aren't being open to you, create your own door. And that's what I've done. And we don't need, not in the 21st century where we have all the access we have to and the opportunities we have, We no longer need to wait for a ticket. We no longer need to wait for a door to be open to us. We can create our own door. But for those who, and I'm not pushing for any exclusionary
Right.
policy, but there are people who have gone ahead of us who are doing a great job, who are leaving the door open. And I salute those individuals and I follow in their footstep. And whichever room I go in, leave that door open for other people to enter just the same.
I want to add something to what you said because that's a lot of quality and that's quality work that you're speaking of. But I think a lot of times when you have people that do the work that you do, or what the purpose that we use this platform for, and that is when you want to highlight and you want to build your community, we should not be apologizing for that
Mhm.
because I think for some people, I mean, that's people that look like you and I as well. There are some people that believe that because we want to build our communities that we're being exclusionary when we're not. It's not about excluding, okay? If you want to join the team, that's fine and dandy. But there's no need to say, oh, well, no, that's only for this place, so that's only for this box. No, that's not the case. You're not being exclusionary. Actually, what you are a very great big visionary that's actually looking to help and to solve a greater problem, a bigger problem that needs to, not only being highlighted, but needs to be shown. So there's no need to apologize for that. If some people want to misunderstand that, they just misunderstand that. But, I think there's a problem that we have within our own culture that when it comes to wanting to do that, people start to think that you have to include everybody in that, regardless of the case. And that's not necessarily true. Because if we don't do the work and we don't have people to help us to build that, then we don't get it. But if some people are thinking small like that, then they are allowed to think small, but you don't have to apologize for that because I know you're not being exclusionary, but that's just the way some people think. And I understand that.
No, you're perfectly right. And I think one of the things that we need to do a greater job about is to tell our story. And I
Yes.
think too often we don't tell our story enough. No, thankfully for you, Charles, and I've mentioned this to you when we spoke earlier,
Mhm.
that you are doing a great job in getting the information out. Because there were times on my journey where I thought that I was the only one, and that's not the case. It's just that most of the people who have gone ahead of us and who are even doing it even now, we are not aware that they are doing it because they're not sharing their story loud enough so that other people can hear it. And I think this platform is a blessing when it comes to that because you're providing a means to get that information out there for people to realize that hey, this is what is really happening. It's just like, and I like this because Oprah Winfrey is a statement she makes, and I remember it quite well. She said, I come as one, but I stand as 10,000. So, in this setting now, and in this space as we are speaking now, people need to realize that if you think you're alone, you're not alone. There are many more people out there who are working, and we need to do a better job to share our story. And I think once we do that collectively, we'll only raise the spirit of our people to thrive for more and push for more.
Yes. And so, how do you help executives reconnect with disengaged teams?
Now, I'm happy you asked that question, and I think this is where I am super excited about the work that I do because I think for far too long we have been treating the important work of culture as if it's some fluffy stuff that is not really important and is a tick box exercise. But the great management consultant Peter Drucker said it. It doesn't matter how good your strategy is, culture will eat it for breakfast. And we need to address the culture.
Yep.
And this is where I come in differently because I see culture now as a risk control and a human dignity issue, not just some fluffy program that you implement closer to Black History Month or whenever for a week or two or for the whole month, and you think that you are doing a great service. No, if the environment is not right, it will cost you more. And there's enough study and information out there on this. If you read Harvard Business Review, Forbes, Gallup, all these institutions which have been carrying out these research, there's enough evidence to show that where there is a toxic culture, it costs the organization far much more in terms of turnover, absenteeism, and quiet quitting. So it's a critical issue that needs to be addressed. And I think the reason why we are stagnating on this issue is because we're not giving it the attention that it deserves. And I think culture should now be viewed as a risk control function and also a human dignity issue. And if we approach it from that perspective, then I think we will see a shift taking place.
And so let's transition over to Black history and influences. When we spoke and I asked you who were the most influential people in your life in Black history, your life and career, you told me Marcus Garvey, Martin Luther King Jr., and Nelson Mandela. Can you tell us when Marcus Garvey emphasized self reliance and empowerment, how has his philosophy shaped your career?
That's a great question. And I am happy for how I have aligned myself over these past few years, and particularly the great work that the union movement does, not only here in the UK, but around the world, because it's a massive movement. It's all about economic empowerment.
Mhm.
And let's be real here. I remember when it was 95% of the world's population living off 5% of the world's wealth, and the 5% own the 95% of the world's resources and wealth, have it under control. And then I remember in my own lifetime where that became 97 to 3, where 3% had control of 97% of the resources, and 97% was living off just 3%. No, it's not even 1% to 99. It's less than 1%. That's not a sustainable model. And I think far much more has to be done. And on many fronts. Most people, myself included, we were poorly educated financially. We never had a good financial education. And I agree with John Hope Bryan that it's a civil right issue and that has to change. So we have to change our attitude towards that. We have to be more educated as to how money works. We need to understand wealth, how to build wealth, and also how to build that generationally. And we can't depend on the school system to do that because that has failed. And we need to realize that the world in which we live in, we have to, everybody. Whether or not you want to become an entrepreneur or not, you will have to be you will have to have that entrepreneurial spirit to survive. And we have to get involved because if it continues like this, it will no longer be sustainable.
Mhm. Um, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. spoke harmony and justice. How do you apply his vision to team dynamics?
We have to recognize that the importance of other people because I have always said this: everyone has value, but not everyone adds value. Capacity is always present, potential is always present, but its expression is often restricted. And that brings us back to culture. The way in which we view people will determine how we treat them. And for far too long, we we have seen many people stunted, and it has to do with the environment within which they were placed. And this starts from the home, this starts from the school, the church, all of our organization. They have play a part in creating this problem we have, and we have to get back to the basics and to ensure that people realize that they can accomplish anything they dream. And as long as they're not going to be destructive and they need to get a sense of their duty and their responsibility to ensure that they are not just here to be here, but they are also here to make a meaningful contribution that will outlive them. And I think once we can help to raise better human beings, then we'll be on that track. So, in order to have harmony and justice, we have to learn to treat people better. And that's all people, regardless of how we look and where we are from. And I think this is where minorities have a very important role to play because we know what it's like to be on the outside. We know what it's like to be treated as an outcast, and we know how to get along despite that. And I think we have a unique perspective and a unique lived experience which allow us to address some of the ills and the concerns. And there's no one better to address it than us because we have lived it.
Exactly. Exactly. Nelson Mandela embodied resilience and reconciliation. How has his legacy influenced your leadership style?
Mm. Now, before I answer that, I would like to share a very important story. I remember quite vividly in my early years when I joined the British military, we had this leadership session. And whilst we were having this talk, I remember it now. It, it, it was quite an experience. And I'm going to get to it and you will see why. So here we were in a lecture theater, soldiers there, and we had senior leaders present. And they were discussing famous leaders. Obviously, the topic was leadership. And of course, they had all these military leaders who fought in the First World War, the Second World War. You had leaders from the great German leaders, military leaders, and others. And you had Mahatma Gandhi and Mother Teresa and others. And surprisingly enough, when the picture of Nelson Mandela came up on the board, there was a senior leader in the room at the time. He walked to the front of the room and said, who think this person is a leader, and everybody agreed, obviously, this person is a leader. And his remark was at the time, oh yeah, this one, he's a terrorist. And when I heard that,
Mm.
I stopped to myself and I said, what's going on here? And of course, I'm looking around in the room. Is anyone going to say anything? Nobody said anything. But what that did, he was not challenged, but I just knew deep down that something wasn't right. Because here it is, the one person on that board that I could resonate with, that I grew up learning about and this struggle, and considering that this man was incarcerated in my lifetime, and we knew how well, I shouldn't say well, but how poorly and horrifically South Africans were being treated during the period of apartheid, which pretty much happened in my lifetime. It's funny just to even think about that. And at this time, this man was already a hero. He had already served his term as president of South Africa, but yet still here somebody who is reciting a narrative which existed during the time of apartheid, and yet still he was unchallenged. Now that led me to do research and to research more. And of course, that's when I would have gotten into a greater understanding of the reason or his motivation for saying those unfortunate words at the time, because of course the then government, then UK government at the time, and many other world government, they were on the wrong side of history. But and again, it points back to the very important thing that I said to you before. We have to know our own story. We have to know our own history, and we have to celebrate those leaders who have done so much in being a trailblazer and sacrificing so much that we can have all the benefits that we now enjoy. And if we don't know our story and we don't tell it and we don't celebrate the people who has done so much for us, someone else will spin another narrative, and you know what can happen, because I
Mhm.
don't believe everybody in that audience who look like me left that room and went and did the research that I did,
Mhm.
and came to the realization and what led him to make those unfortunate comments.
So, in summation, why are these three figures, Garvey, King, and Mandela, the most influential in your life?
When I see them, I could see myself.
Mhm.
And that's important, because bearing in mind that for the longest time we we have been sold another narrative. In other words, leadership does not come from us. Leadership doesn't exist, among us, and we have to look to another to lead. And the narrative pretty much means we were born to follow. And in some form or another, we have all been fed that.
Mhm.
And we just have to, let's just say, get rid of that false narrative, because it shows up in our behavior and it shows up in the way we approach things.
Yeah.
And as long as we continue to believe that lie and that misinformation, then we'll never truly rise up to be the people that we were meant to be and to make the contribution that we can make.
And final question for you. If you could sit down with Garvey, King, and Mandela today, what would you ask them?
I think The one question I will ask them is this: why did they do what they did at the time they did it? And why didn't what kept them back from doing it earlier?
Mm. You know, I love that question, and there's like so many different ways, and I'm sure that even historians, everybody would love to like chime in on that, because that question, it more than raises you know some sense of being and sense of awareness, but just when you take in consideration and you think about you know how leaders that have been a part of what they call a movement that's actually tried to move our culture the way it's supposed to be and where it's supposed to be. And the first thing that happens is they're always and always have been assassinated.
Mm,
And so I think with a lot of folk that even going into leadership, that's even now, as we try to get the things right for the culture, to have the culture to be better and to do better. A lot of people are afraid to take those reins because they are afraid of that. And I think that goes back to a long line of things that you and I could sit there and we could talk about that forever. We could talk about that forever. But the truth is always the truth. And what we know is what we know. So until a lot of people start to use this, and once this actually open up and they can see with these like they're supposed to, then we'll know better and we'll do better. It's not saying that it's everybody, but it's some. And those that cannot see and will not see are the ones that are playing gatekeeper. And so those are the folk that we always got to be aware of, be aware of who they are, because those are the people that will do any of us the most harm and cause us the most harm. And they look just like you and I.
yep, I've met some along the journey as well.
Yeah, that's the strange thing. That's crazy, but it's true. But I will say this, you know, uh, if I still say this, and I stand by this mantra: if it's worth having, then it's worth doing, and if it's worth doing, then that means that you go out there and you do what you got to do, and you don't think about those things, because you know, hey, if it's to be, it's to be. So, in closing, do you have any words of wisdom and encouragement for our audience? You can tell them how to connect with you on your website, how to connect with you on your socials. What are those words? What's the wisdom you like to leave for them?
The key parting word I would like to share with your amazing audience is that you can accomplish anything you dream. And the key thing is to get to that place where you become extremely clear about what your life's work really is, and to become hyper focused. And the moment you become hyper focused and you pursue that, then that's when you will change your world, and by extension change the world. Now, in terms of connecting with me, it's easy for you to connect. My most dominant platform is LinkedIn. You search for me there by my name, Leroy Robert. And also, my details will be in the show notes so they can connect with me and all other social platform. And I am on all of them.
Right. Well, I want to thank you for sharing, you not just your story, but spending this time with us to inform and to tell people your story and how you got to be the great leader that you are today and the things that you are doing. Because it's very, very important when people get the opportunity to see people that look like them, that are doing positive good things that feed back into the community to help the community grow. And I want to thank you for, actually, coming here and showing us, how things work, and how that experience went for you going from Jamaica to the UK. Because I'm sure that that had to be some, one of those things that you was ready for, but you made that adjustment and you still did what was necessary. And I am so proud of you for the work that you've done, but also for you being you. That's the thing that's most important.
Thank you, Charles. It has been amazing. And of course, I congratulate you as well for the amazing work you're doing and keep up the good job.
I thank you and I appreciate that. For those of you that are watching on all of our platforms, especially those of you that are watching on the YouTube channels, if you have not yet subscribed, I would ask if you could please support us by subscribing and enabling all notifications on the channels. What that would mean is that as we go live for all of our shows, you get the notification and you can click and just watch the show. You'll also be able to go back and watch all of our previous shows and get the knowledge and wisdom that has been left here on this platform by each and every professional that has been here in their capacity, that's doing work to help the community. Um, that would be the end of our show tonight. I want to thank you guys again. Please join us tomorrow night, same time, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, as we broadcast another great show for you live. And I want to thank you guys just for being here. Please come back and watch the show tomorrow night. It's another great show. I'm your host, Charles King, and this is America in Black and White. We will be here again tomorrow night, continually continuing to color conversations on the canvas of America. You guys have a great evening, and please come back and see us tomorrow night. Thank you all again. Thank you, Leroy, and I will definitely be in touch with you.